This is the Bema Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today we are with Elle Grover Fricks to kick off a new series, Talmudic Conversations in Matthew.
I'm so excited. Season 8 is great.
I hope you're excited because this is your series, Elle.
Yep. It would be a bummer if I was like, it's mid. It's okay.
For a while there, I thought you were going to talk in rhymes the whole time, and I was like, oh, I'm here for this series.
I couldn't be here for that. I read enough Dr. Seuss and etc. with my children to be happy to have a little break from meter. But the central organizing question of this series is, what kind of insight do we miss when we don't understand the fullness of the conversation? Or more positively stated, what do we have to gain by exploring the fullness of the cultural conversation? Kind of reminds me of a book that somebody wrote recently, slipping my mind.
We can ask questions. We can ask good questions. We can ask bad questions. We can ask better questions.
That's right.
This feels like one of those better varieties.
I hope so. Any speaker worth their salt, right? Theologian, politician, academic, scientist, the whole 9 yards. They're not just downloading their information from the sky and delivering it to their listeners ex nihilo, but sometimes we think of Jesus that way. However, all those speakers are hopefully engaging with their cultural, historical, theological context. So our potential for misunderstanding is enormous when we miss these contextual reference points. But also the potential for richness is equally enormous when we do take the time to educate ourselves about historical background, and in this particular case, Talmudic background.
Okay, now you say Talmudic. I'm going to interrupt you with a question here.
Sure.
Talmud comes a century later than we might say like our New Testament canon. So talk to us about the relevance of how do we tie those two together, historically speaking, when we think of those kind of things.
Absolutely. So the Talmud is a written account of oral tradition, which spans back pre-birth of Jesus. And helpfully, sometimes there's dates annotated alongside different rabbis who are speaking. And so it's very easy to be like, oh, this is pre-Jesus. Oh, this is post-Jesus, etc. I don't personally believe the Talmud is inspired. And it's not the only tool in our interpretive toolbox. But it is a fabulous place for all these ancient conversations, contemporary with Jesus and preceding Jesus, were recorded, and they're jam-packed with feisty debates of all colors. Would have informed Jesus's learning.
Would it be safe to say, here's how I've always framed it in my mind, that when you're looking at things like the Talmud, the Mishnah, the Talmud, you're looking at conversations that probably represent the conversations that are happening in the days of the apostles in that first century. Sometimes we can say, like you said, sometimes we can say with definition, like, yes, that this was, maybe this one was late, but in general, these are conversations that get us close to that Second Temple, post-Second Temple world of the apostles in the New Testament.
Absolutely. And even if somebody's written down and it says like circa 300 AD or whatever, it's still representing a longer conversation that's been going on for quite a while, right? So one of the first volumes of Talmud talks about like, how many times are we praying? How many times are we saying Shema? And the later editions aren't necessarily like, boom, new ideas popping out of nowhere. There are these continuations of conversations that have been going on for a very long time. So yeah, that's...
Amen. I agree. I love it.
Okay, awesome.
So are you saying that potentially in hundreds of years, somebody could write down the debates that we're having on this podcast and call it a Talmud? Unlikely, but
I hope
like
they
that's
wouldn't
kind of
call
the
it
idea is
Talmud, but
or whatever name they want to come up for.
What would be a little closer analogy is if Brent had all of his own disciples and I had all of my own disciples, and so on and so forth, and then later it would be in the name of Rav Elle. you have forsaken the truth, and you should be ashamed. And then it would be like the Talmudim of Rav Brent replied, actually, you should be whipped 18 times because you forgot Zechariah 10:16. That would be the Talmudic crossover there.
Well, now it's even less likely, I think, but sure. Sounds good.
So
I just think it should be called Doomlot, as in Talmud backwards, and we'll be in good shape.
Okay, so why are we having this conversation in Matthew? Bema's already done Matthew. There's a whole season that's nothing but verse by verse Matthew. What am I thinking?
And it's not nothing but it's mostly. Yeah.
Practically nothing but. Well, I have 3 reasons. Number 1, it has a lot of Talmudic connections because, as Marty and Brent discussed back then, it's a very Jewish gospel. It can be more slim pickings if we're looking over at Mark, right? Written to Romans, so less Talmudic connections. Not none. Certainly, but fewer. Number 2, I don't like being glued down to a verse by verse approach. We've done that already. But it's good to start at the beginning, right? This Matthew is the beginning for a reason. Papias of Hierapolis, Q document, be darned. That's a different fight for a different time. But
Indeed. A different time, a different place.
And yet, Matthew is the beginning because of its Hebraic origin. And so we got to start there. We got to start, if we're going to move through, continue to return to these themes, we should start at the beginning. So we're only in the series going to get through about 5 1/3 chapters together. But we're going to take our time and enjoy pursuing what goals can be found through this Talmudic lens. Final note, I'm not going to give an exact citation for every quote from the Talmud that I'm pulling. One of the reasons is that the citations are long. One of them sounds like Jerusalem Talmud Sekalim 6.3 50a 45. Rav Yonatan ben Zakkai said, that's way too long. I've got 30 references in there in this episode alone. I'm not going to do that every time. They are direct quotes, and so you can Google them, go on Sefaria, and they'll pop right up. There you go. If you want to pursue more, use your own agency there.
Sefaria is our source for is where people could easily go, or just Google in general.
I mean, you run a little bit of a risk of coming up with adjacent things when you use Google, but oftentimes it'll give you the citation, and then you can pop over to Sefaria from whatever kind of odd space you find yourself in if you just Google it.
A dance between the two is even how I use it. I've been amazed at how a lot of our listeners have gotten so used to, familiar with, and effective with Sefaria. So hats off.
Yeah.
Tip of the cat to them.
Of the cat?
Yeah, that probably came out a little funny. Tip of the cap.
I mean,
how come all you guys got to make fun of how I talk? Huh? I thought it was just read, and now we've all hung out together.
It's not how you talk, it's what you said. You said cat.
I didn't know that you were being persecuted by Reed, so I claim...
Always, Elle. Always. You can just assume that it's always the case.
Okay. We're kicking off here in Matthew 1. In our research question here, scientific approach, is what, if anything, is remarkable about Jesus? There we go. You got me on the weird word train.
Golly, what are you saying Jesus for, Elle?
I have a brain injury. Now what?
Oh, man.
Okay. What, if anything, is remarkable about Jesus's genealogy? So this is one big insider baseball conversation in this passage, but is the point of his genealogy going to be that Jesus is remarkable or that Jesus is not remarkable? Any bets right off the top about what we're going to see together?
Can I bet on both?
No, that's
Don't
cheating.
do that, Brent. You beat me to it. I could argue either side.
Pumpkin eaters.
Remarkable in his imremarkability, maybe, or remarkable in what surprises us about his remarkableness.
Okay, 2 feckless takes right off the top. It's great. Fine.
I mean, I would argue more easily for remarkable because he comes from all the people that you would want them to come from.
Okay, well, that's great. I like a firm stance. I appreciate that, Brent. Thanks for getting out there in the fray. Okay, so some questions first before we read this first verse together that might come up around genealogy. So number one, how did anyone know their genealogy post-Babylon? Surely those records were lost. Surely there's intermarriage and they're under oppression. So how did anyone know their genealogies? Any ideas?
I have heard all kinds of things, but I don't know much of the actual credibility of the things that I've heard or the history behind them. I've been told that the priestly office kept very, very accurate records in that regard, that some of the work of the chronicler, like you see evidence of this. And that even starts in Babylon. Like they see this need for, if we don't do something, we could lose our identity, we could lose our faith, we could lose our people. And so all kinds of things get started, and one of those being the idea of chronology and record keeping and the chronicles and all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. We also see it in Tanakh itself. The stress about lineage shows up in the book of Ezra 9 and 10 specifically.
Oh, sure.
Ezra is freaking out about people's marriages. And why is that? Genealogy, as seen in the episode title, is a metric of legacy, right? It's not about like racial purity. It's really easy for us to take our contemporary struggles and paradoxes and try to put them back into the past, but that's not quite it. It's rather about, have we been able to hold true and be faithful to the covenant of God? Have you compromised the walk of your house, right? Are you assimilating or are you not? Like you alluded to, totally terrifying coming out of Babylon. Are we going to continue to exist or not? We know that this isn't just tradition. Hagiography that's made up, because Josephus and different teachers in the Talmud mention these records are lying around. It was typical for them to go back 200 years to have full birth dates for each ancestor in your genealogy.
Makes me think of the end of like the book of Genesis, where I know Foreman's teaching on the Jacob story, as Jacob has to pass on to Joseph. Like, you cannot stay here in Egypt. You have to take my bones, because this family's legacy is in a different land, telling a different story than the story of Egypt and empire.
Right.
No matter what the influence we've had on it is. And so in a sense, when you're thinking genealogy, this is the core of what God has asked you to do. Like that's a point really well made about, it's not about racial purity. My legacy is tied to something that God invited us to do and we said yes to.
Right.
And so, which really, I mean, man, if the Joseph story was a part of Genesis that was written during the Babylonian exile, that would make a lot of sense. But nevertheless, I digress.
Okay, I got to throw in my shade on cue, so you can throw in your silliness about divergent timelines in Genesis. That's fine. That's fine. I can handle it. So is it unusual to have access to this genealogy if, as you say, it's so critical to the understanding of what God is doing? I think it's like Rashi who says it's more important to read the genealogy of Adam early in Genesis than the rest of all of Torah. Did people still have these lying around? And also, like you alluded to, it was part of the purview of the Sanhedrin to keep these genealogical records on everyone, especially the priests, because the priests are not allowed to have any quote unquote blemish in their bloodline. So this is about to get a little bit weirder, a little bit of Slytherin energy, because all of this information about genealogy, about legacy, about bloodline has to be publicly known, because you have to know the purity of your family line. As a result of this, and the Sanhedrin holding on to all this information about everybody, a sort of caste system emerged. That's not a word that they use, but comes to mind for me. So priests, sons of Levi, and full-blooded Yisraelites are able to marry each other in the time of the Talmud. Today, only Kohanim are allowed to marry other Kohanim. That's a different modern thing. But back then, those are the folks who can marry each other, not full-blooded folks, proselytes, freedmen, mamzers, foundlings, and shtukim, which means silent ones, can marry each other. So what's a shtukim or a shtuk? It's when you know your mom, but either you don't know or you're not telling who your dad is. And that, of course, is Jesus, right? He clearly has a mom, and even though he and Miriam might say who the dad is, it's not totally believed by his community, right? So 3 things immediately hop out of that concept to me. Number 1, Jesus is hanging out with his people the whole time, right? He's not like bending down from his great purity and great social hierarchy points to hang out with outsiders. He's already marginalized by inhabiting this class called shtukim. He is marginalized, even though the rest of his genealogy may or may not be great, which we'll see in a minute. Number 2, Jesus is dealing with additional discrimination, even as an adult, right? It kind of reframes a couple of the things when he's saying, I know my Father in heaven. Obviously, that's still a theological statement, but it's also a statement about this social status. I'm not silenced. I know who my dad is. And it's a supernatural thing with God the Father. I know him. It's a little bit of a very much rather a rebellious statement to make in the social construct.
Do you feel like that's at play a lot in the Gospel of John with all of his talk about the Father?
I think it's
Father,
very possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Very
And then he also opens that door more, right, to be like, and whoever follows the commandments also. So he takes this social nugget of a construct and then pops it open for everybody else to walk through as well, which is cool. Finally, and maybe most experimentally, Jesus not getting married himself could be kind of a rebuffing of the system. I think there's probably plenty of reasons that he didn't get married, but this could be one of them. That to get married, he would have to stay within his social hierarchy, which would then be conforming to this kind of messed up social status thing, even though we still honor the themes of why they cared about these issues so much. We don't love the marginalization of people who are not born in that system, right? The system still exists, by the way, in modern Israel. Once you get right of center anyway, you have matchmakers, shadchanim, and their job isn't so much like just the fun, quirky, like, oh, do these people have chemistry together? The Fiddler on the Roof stuff. They're also doing like PI investigator work to see if the family has had any cancer or any mental illness in their family line. And then if they do find that out, it's very hard to get married. And so these elaborate things where people go to great lengths rather, to hide this kind of information still exists in especially Orthodox Jewish society. So you learn something new every day. Okay, returning to Mashiach, to Messiah, to Jesus, how high stakes is this genealogy for Jesus? What are the expectations like? Would you think that he would have to have an immaculate genealogy or, whatever? It doesn't matter. He's supposed to be the dust of the earth or whatever.
I mean, I think it just depends on which community he wants to engage and how readily they're going to accept him.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he shows up at age 12 asking all these questions and everybody's impressed. And presumably they would have an idea of what his social standing is if it's so important to them.
Right.
So maybe it's like, well, it doesn't matter that is not as shipshape as we would like it to be. Like, I'm gonna find my way in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Depends on who you are with. Nothing's monolithic, for sure.
Yeah, I kept thinking of all the references that are made in the Gospels to his pedigree. It might even be in passing, and yet they seems even his own. His hometown of Nazareth isn't this so and so's son? Isn't this
right?
His family. I mean, it seems like there'd be relatively high stakes anyway, but for the role that he fills as a teacher.
Right.
And that kind of a voice, authority is going to be a common across gospel lines in multiple gospels and John. So the synoptics and John, I mean, it's going to be seems like pretty high stakes to me in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. So we, just like y'all said, we have folks on both sides. So Berachot in Talmud says, poor breeding in a person's house is worse than the war of Gog and Magog in the Messianic era, which is apocalyptic language. But on the other side, when they're talking about King David, who, as we'll see, has, some sketchy Moabite heritage, they say one does not set a ruler over a community unless a bag of creeping animals hangs down his back, i.e. his family purity can be questioned, so that if he was to become arrogant, people can say to him, turn around. Feels very Pauline to me.
Interesting.
Yeah, both and. Last question before we actually finally read a verse of text, verse 1. Does all of this even matter? Because folks who are familiar with this chapter remember that it's Joseph's genealogy. And the answer is yes. If you're adopted, that lineage legally becomes your own. This comes out theologically in our own adoption, right? Jesus is the firstborn in our family line. We're all the siblings. Yay. So it does matter. Hurrah. Would you like to read verse 1 for us, Brent Billings?
This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham.
Fantastic. Okay, so this is not going to be a complete genealogy. It actually skips 4 different generations in there. So keep that in mind as we zoom in on these specific spots in this lengthy genealogy. But why does it go out of order and start with David, followed by Abraham? Not even chronological.
Well, I can tell you what I've been told and taught before, but again, I don't know about its credibility. It always makes me nervous when I'm here with teacher Elle.
Oh, no. That would not be the posture I would hope I would engender.
So I've been told that David is the highlight of this genealogy. Matthew points out the 14 generations that span between Abraham and David, and then David and... Well, see, now I'm questioning myself, but I know that there was a connection to gematria and the value of David. The whole point being that Jesus is a son of David, not just a Jew and the son of Abraham, but that he is a son of David, because that's what we need, this messianic son of the promised king.
Right. Okay, I like it. Plus or minus some gematria, I'm all for gematria when it lines up beautifully and makes my point for me, but otherwise.
Brad Gray did a teaching once for us on the Palouse when he was in town that showed the number of generations in the 3 sections of the genealogy line up to the numbers of the name of David.
George didn't do that, but my husband has a really cool thing with the 14 that I don't remember either. He pulled it apart. Somebody could ask him about that sometime. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. So starting with David and Abraham, we end up working from the solution, right, rather than the question. So it says this is the genealogy of Jesus, Messiah, son of these guys. So we're like, well, of course they're those guys. Those guys are the important guys. But when we look around at these contemporary writings, and we're popping out of Talmud for a sec, those aren't necessarily the big dogs we're expecting. So first, Enoch thought Messiah would be Maccabean in family lineage. The Sibylline oracles prophesied that it would be Joshua or Moshe. So they might have expected to see that, right? Instead, this is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, son of Joshua and Moshe, right? So what kind of Messiah would you might expect from a descendant of Joshua and or Moshe?
Oh, goodness. Mm-hmm. From Joshua and Moshe, I would think, prophet or warrior.
Right. Big military imagery, soldier imagery, deliverance,
Okay.
Crushing your enemies in the sea supernaturally or not supernaturally, right? That's the themes that come along with those guys. Not that there's anything wrong with them potentially, but what kind of themes pop up for David and Abraham?
Like kingdom and faith.
Yeah.
Hospitality, deference to the Lord's anointed.
Yes. Yeah. So in David, we see this friend of God who is not keen to take kingdom until he is given explicit permission multiple times, right? Somebody who pays deference to the providence and will of God over his own desires.
Children through people other than their wife.
His name is Love, okay? So he's a son of love. And then Abraham, of course, thanks to the work of Apollos, we know Abraham is all about blessing all nations, right? And that's, of course, the legacy that he's standing in and calling us all into. So already right at the top, we're setting this thematic statement. What kind of Messiah do we have here?
I like that.
David also the only one in this genealogy given a title. He's specifically referred to as King David.
Yeah, a little toss in direction of kingdom there.
Yeah.
There's a word I'm looking for. Could you read verses 2 through 4, Brent Billings?
Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Aminadab, Aminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon.
You were going so strong. So good. You just got to pronounce
I couldn't decide which way I wanted to go on
Anglophone, the anglicized versions, full force.
Nahshon the father of fish.
There we go. Yeah, totally. Pacific Northwest fish. Okay, so I want to zoom in on Yehuda and, of course, Tamar with him. But why Yehuda? What's surprising about Messiah coming from Yehuda rather than someone else in the lineage of Yaakov there?
Not the favored child of Jacob.
Yeah, totally. Who would be the other expected pull?
Well, you'd want to see names like maybe the Joseph. I mean, we're indebted to Foreman for reclaiming that Judah story, showing us that Judah's the real actual hero of that story of Joseph. And in that regard, it's the name I want to see, but only because of the ways I've been taught to reframe that story.
Right. But pretending you don't know anything, we've got what's the usual construct that we see of who's the big deal in a big group of siblings? The
firstborn,
right,
the Bechor.
Right. We would expect to see the Bechor. Now, Reuven kind of explicitly loses his Bechor status because of his life choices. However, Yosef is the one that we would expect to see out of Zechariah 10. Talmud says, in the future, the anointed soldier, Messiah, will arise from Yosef. But the anointed who arises from Yehuda will be stronger than him. Yeah. So if you're not familiar in the Essene community, they're expecting 3 messiahs. Just like I was taught in my Reformed catechism growing up, you need a prophet, you need a priest, and a king. And so the Essenes thought that you would have 3 messiahs. So that's what they're alluding to with 2 different anointed ones there. But we see the anointed one who arises from Yehuda is stronger than the one coming from Yosef. But once again, we have that motif show up where it's not the soldier, right? The anointed soldier, Messiah, will arise from Yosef. So very fun. Little pokes already right at the top of Matthew's gospel, letting us know what's going to happen in this whole scroll. One other thing from Genesis Rabbah, actually, about Yehuda. I have a special place in my heart for Midrashim that seemingly, to me anyway, exist in order to exonerate our protagonists and our heroes. They entertain me when I am done being slightly annoyed. So Genesis Rabbah is talking about Yehuda and trying to exonerate him from his choices to see Tamar, his daughter. If you don't know what we're talking about, go back, read Genesis. Great story. But so they reframe the story this way. Yehuda wanted to pass by the prostitute in the road, but God sent him the angel that resists sexual impulse. The angel said to him, Yehuda, where are you going? Where shall kings come from? Where shall the great ones come from? And so Yehuda turned to Tamar beside the path, not of his own free will. And he said, what pledge shall I give you? It says the Holy Spirit of prophecy flashed within Tamar. And so she said, your signet ring, this indicates kingdom, and your staff, this indicates the king, the Messiah. So we've got some Genesis Rabbah lore about Messiah coming from Tamar and Yehuda specifically.
May we all have our mistakes reinterpreted so favorably.
Right. I love that as a pattern. Like, I would hope that people did the same for me. So sure, I'll not check this one in the trash. That's great. Amen, Brent.
It's one of my favorite midrash, but I always have a very positive outlook on midrash when we encounter it. I think part of what the midrash there is attempting to do is not exonerate Judah, but point out the parts of the story that, because we referenced that. I didn't reference it directly, but we referenced that in season 1 when we went through, because, or maybe not, maybe that happened in a discussion group, but the staff and the signet ring in particular seems to be a midrashic hint that Judah's kingship will be based on his ability to look at his mistakes and confess them full in the face. And I always have loved that midrash because of how it can be used and reframed within a conversation about tshuva and repentance and all of those beautiful, wonderful things.
Absolutely. You can then do a hop, skip, and a jump over to the prodigal son, right, who gets the staff back, and you can...
baby.
I know that's not the main remez, but you can still be like, Tamar.
Absolutely. 100%.
Okay, well, now that we've given people homework, they can really flesh that out on their own. We're going to pop on down to Perez or Peretz in that genealogical line that we saw there. Can you remind us what Perez's name means, Marty?
Pratz means to explode or burst forth.
Yeah.
Could play on the Greek or probably the Hebrew version of Matthew, however we want to frame that. But a conversation there about exploding in a kingdom, an explosive kingdom. We talk about that in season 3, but
yeah, absolutely.
Pratz being the exploder.
Right. And so it makes sense that Messiah bringing kingdom would be, Ben Perez would be son of Pratz. But we also have some specific Talmudic, I'm hesitant to say prophecy because that has theological implications, but foreshadowing, predictions perhaps. Here's one. When the child withdrew his hand, so this again is from Genesis 38, talking about the way these twins were born. When the child withdrew his hand, his brother came out, and the midwife said, what mighty force you have used. You will become mighty and take possession of the kingdom. And then a related teaching on Pratz, although all things were created in their full form and glory, after the first human sinned, the created things became corrupt and will not return to their original condition until the son of Perez comes. So people are able to break free from the curse and access this pre-fall state. I know that's a lot of theology, which people can argue about at a different time. But this is the prediction that we're looking for a Messiah who will be able to free us from the curse. And that person ought to be Ben Perez. So we have some boxes being checked, right? Of, yes, this is who we would expect. And some boxes left unchecked, which leads us to our next thing. Can you read verses 4 and 5, Brent?
Ram, the father of Aminadab, Aminadab, the father of Nashon, Nashon, the father of Salmon, Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed, the father of Jesse.
Great. An abrupt finish there. Okay. So y'all already talked beautifully about the inclusion of Rahav in Jesus's legacy It's lovely stuff. This outsider being brought in, right? She's a proselyte. Talmud says, blessed are those whom he enables to come near, even though he has not yet chosen them. Some stories talk about her receiving the Holy Spirit. Some stories talk about how 9 priestly prophets, including Huldah, by the way, descended from Rahav. So she's very cool, right? We read Joshua and we like her chutzpah. We like her leadership. We love her rescuing her family, right? We love her freely choosing to join the family of God. All of that great stuff. But more exciting, at least to me in this particular episode, when we cross-reference genealogies, and specifically in tradition rabbinic literature, does anybody know who Rahav marries post the destruction of her town?
Oh, I do. Oh, I can't remember, though. Oh, shoot.
Someone call Basse. No, it is Joshua. Traditionally,
right.
She marries Joshua. And I love this because Matthew could have absolutely done the normal expected thing of including the guy, the man, right, instead of the woman. And instead, even though Joshua is the expected progenitor of Messiah, he very poignantly sidesteps him completely and goes with Rahav instead.
Absolutely. That's fantastic.
Yeah, right.
And I wonder if there would even be any, because you said, was it prophets that descended from
Prophet
Rahab?
Priests. So like Jeremiah.
Prophet priests. Okay. So like I was even thinking your prophet priest king thing, wondering how that even begins to play into some of these things.
Very, very fun stuff.
Huh.
So Jesus is not the soldier whose job it is to clear out all the people who aren't supposed to be there. Opposite.
That's good.
So who's Salmon then? Salmon.
He's really good with a nice like maple, soy, ginger glaze. It's not verse by verse, so I don't have to tell you about it.
You had me read that verse.
By the way, when you talk about reading those verses, can we just link Andrew Peterson's Matthew's Baguettes in the show notes? Because no study of Matthew 1 is complete without Mr. Peterson's fine music.
I'm not aware, so I'll have to reap the joy of that when this episode comes out.
Absolutely, Elle. And you can thank me later.
Okay. I'll text you a couple months from now for sure. Okay. We're going to jump on down to Ruth. Ruth, of course, is another chutzpah-y, living on the edge, marginalized figure, right, in society, not in Tanakh. Tanakh honors her beautifully. But again, she is mentioned by name, this third woman in Jesus' genealogy, highlighting the themes from previous seasons of Bema. But the specific Talmudic thing I want to talk about with the Ruth is Talmud takes that section in Ruth 2. If folks don't remember, Boaz spots Ruth, and he has a lot of things to say, but then he invites her on the lunch date. And this Talmudic teaching picks apart what he says to her during this break from the harvest. And it says, when Boaz spoke to Ruth, he said, come here. And what he meant by that is come into the kingdom. When he said, eat from the bread, because he gives her specific invitations on how to eat and what to eat. He says, eat from the bread. And they say, that's the bread of the kingdom. And then he says, dip your bite into the vinegar, little balsamic situation, lovely, lovely. But apparently that refers to the sufferings of Messiah. And then she sat down beside the reapers because the Messiah's rule will be taken from him for a time. And then Boaz hands Ruth roasted ears of wheat because Messiah's rule will return to him and he will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. The usual things. So taking apart that, of course, there's a lot to dig into there that's very interesting. But the main takeaway being that they foresaw the coming of Messiah tied specifically to Ruth and Boaz. And so she gets included in this happy little lineup of transgressive women. When you throw in the wife of Uriah, by the way, who isn't named, which is super interesting. All these other women get named. Why is Bathsheba not named? These 4 women then, of course, match with the ancestral mothers of Yisrael, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, and Rachel. So you can also do fun things there, lining them up with each other and making good little comparisons.
I'm still like reeling from the Rahab piece. That was too good.
Okay.
Matthew should have closed with that one. That was so good.
Listeners have the benefit of being able to pause this and consider their thoughts, and we have to do it in real time.
Yeah, no kidding. That last one was so good. I'm still stuck on it. Okay, go ahead.
That's fine. Hopefully the last one's good too. So we've got a penultimate peak here. Could you read verses 10 and 12, Brent?
Oh, 10 and 12, not 10 through 12.
10 through 12.
10 through 12.
I apologize.
Okay. I don't want to read any verses that you specifically are trying to avoid here.
Thomas Jefferson it. Just cut out whatever you don't like.
Hezekiah, the father of Manasseh, Manasseh the father of Ammon, Ammon the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon. After the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel, and Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel.
Love it. Thank you. So we're going to pause on Hezekiah and Jechoniah. So Hezekiah, of course, means what?
I wanted to say, I was thinking Zedekiah in my mind, and that's not right. It's not righteousness, it's strength. Strength of God?
Yes, strength of God. Absolutely.
Bam.
So Hezekiah was supposed to be Messiah, right? We've got these prophecies that, if I recall, someone somewhere said these prophecies aren't about Jesus. They're about Hezekiah and Josiah, blah, 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 blah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's the prophetic perspective. But according to the Midrash, the reason Hezekiah didn't become Messiah was that he didn't sing enough. Praise songs specifically. And the story goes that he had experienced all these miracles, but yet he never praised God like David did, which I think is a fun little reminder that our strength of God is nothing without songs of praise, almost like the greatest of these is love, right?
Well, and connects to Yehuda, right?
Right. Praise
God
guy.
praisers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Hands of praise. Pentecostals everywhere rejoice. Your hands in the air are ordained by the Lord. The Talmudic line, though, about Messiah coming from Hezekiah says, clear out the utensils of uncleanness and have a throne ready for Hezekiah, the king of Yehuda, when he comes. So this image of somebody who's coming back and bringing reform, right? When we talk about like Pharisees and Sadducees and everything that they're expecting for kingdom coming back, that really lines up, right? Get rid of your uncleanness, have the throne ready for this big reformer who threw out all the idols and smashed people, right? That's what they're hoping for. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And so that is part of the work of Jesus, which might make some of us uncomfortable, but that's okay. That's all right. We can breathe through it. Finally, we have Jechoniah. 2 amazing stories about this fellow. So he was, of course, the king as Babylon is coming to sweep everybody away into exile. Jechoniah's sons were born during exile, which I believe Matthew specifically says. Which might be alluding to this teaching. I have 2 teachings here. This is not the final one. So rabbinically, they say that these sons were born during exile because it took going into exile for the king to finally start following Torah, specifically Nida law, which has to do with when you're allowed to be with your wife. So because of this faithfulness, even when separated from the land and all the promises of God, Jechoniah finally starts following Torah, and God tells him, concerning you, by virtue of the blood of your covenant, I will set your prisoners free from the pit. So we have this redemption imagery, this exodus, this deliverance imagery, in this Talmudic thing, which I think Matthew is alluding to. The last one that I really like for this ancestor specifically talks about the moment that Nebuchadnezzar is coming and he's invading the land and he's about to destroy the temple and he demands to see the king. And the king takes the keys to the sanctuary of the temple, and he goes onto the roof of the temple, and he says before God, Lord of the world, before that time we were faithful to you, and your keys were given to us. Now that we are no longer faithful to you, behold, your keys have been returned. He threw the keys up into the sky, and they did not fall down again. Ooh, so I love this because, of course, Matthew 16, Jesus is going to talk about the keys and who has the keys and who has access to the keys, right? It's also going to come back in Revelation 3. And you can do things from Isaiah 22, of course. It's not the only reference to keys that we can pull on there. But I think with the inclusion of this guy who, wasn't the greatest king, right? The exile happened under him. That Matthew is alluding to the idea that his descendant has the power to bring the keys to the presence of God, to atonement, to all these things that were contained in the temple, right? Back down to earth once more.
Yeah, that is super good. I've only heard Jeconiah. How did you say it? Jeconia?
It's a chet, so it's
yeah.
Jeconiah.
Okay. I had always heard him only framed in terms of the curse, that he comes from a cursed line that no king can descend from, which could be used to say, to further the whole, this is a whole genealogy of folks that are rejected, outsiders, stories that, but I do, I like having a whole nother way of looking at the stories, especially from that Talmudical perspective. That's really fun. I like that.
Yay, me too.
I've heard some people say, like, this is how we know it wasn't Joseph's son, because if he came from this line, he couldn't be king at all. So this genealogy is, in a sense, trying to say, has to be descended from Mary and not Joseph. But I like that there are multiple ways of framing this and seeing it. It's good.
Yeah. Does it take another someone from that line to overturn the curse?
Right.
What he's all
Somebody
about.
who has the keys shows up with the keys.
Okay, so our research question was, is this remarkable or unremarkable genealogy for our Messiah? And it's remarkable in that we have some boxes checked. Messiah is supposed to be the son of Perez, the son of Ruth, the son of Hezekiah, but he's also definitely supposed to be Joshua incarnated, right? This big force soldier is supposed to come in and do all his conquering strong things, and yet he's not. He's not a son of Yosef, the soldier, an empire builder, right? He's the son of Yehuda, whose name means praise, as we said. He's the one with the keys. He's the one who undoes the curse, despite being from the wrong caste system, despite having all these sketchy women in his line, despite having people who have failed and made mistakes. He yet carries this incredible lineage on his back.
So you're saying that it is remarkable, and its unremarkability is really what you're... if I do say so myself.
Maybe I should have thought ahead there before I called you feckless for not choosing a side, recalling that I myself am not quite choosing a side. So that's on me. I repent at least halfway.
You can join Cub Feckless. It's excellent.
Club feckless. Not sure about that, but I'll consider it. Next week, we'll be back with Reed to talk about the dream of Yosef and discover what more hidden gems contextually we can find in the book of Matthew.
Okay, and check out the show notes on BehemothStepship.com or in your podcast app and find Marty's favorite song or something.
It's my favorite.
Not favorite.
My favorite artist.
Favorite artist.
My favorite artist.
What?
And one of so good.
Who's going to tell the true OG in Marty's heart?
I've got two favorite artists. That's the one that we're going to talk about today.
Somewhere Chad Kroger's heart just snapped in two. Gotcha.
There's enough room at my right and my left hand for both.
There's always a remnant, right?
Always.
Okay, well, all of the stuff is on the website that you need. Check out groups and events on their contact page is the best way to get in touch with us. So thanks for joining us on the Baby One Podcast. We'll talk to you again soon.